Okay, this video is to talk about the second part of our function standard, which is using and evaluating equations in function notation. So instead of y, you're going to see function notation, which is f of x equals. So f of x is in place of y. F of x then represents the y because y is the output. So again, that's the totality of f of x. The input is still x, which is the number inside the parentheses. So if you were given f of 5, then you would know that x equals 5. And you would be asked to find what f of x is, or what is y when x is 5. So this would be giving you the input of 5. If you were given f of x equals 10, what is x when f of x is 10? Then you would be 10 would represent the output, and you would be asked to find x, the input. So basically, what is the x value when the y value is 10? So in your typical xy ordered pair, you now have x, comma, f of x. Let's look at some examples. Evaluate f of 5 when f of x equals 3x minus 1. So f of x equals 3x minus 1. F of 5 equals, so what are we doing here? We're putting 5 in place of x. So I'm going to come over here and put 5 in place of x and evaluate. 15 minus 1, so f of 5 equals 14. So this would represent the ordered pair, input 5, output 14. On part B, what is x? So whenever they say what is x, you immediately know you are solving for x. They're telling you that h of x equals 14, so it's like substitution. If h of x equals 14, well, here's h of x. Plug in negative 14 for h of x. Negative 14 equals negative 5x plus 6. So this is what you would use to solve for x. Subtract 6 from both sides. Negative 20 equals negative 5x. Divide by negative 5. And x equals 4. So we just figured out that h of 4, when the input is 4, the output is negative 14, meaning if I go back up here and I plug in negative 4, I get an answer of negative 14. This would be represented by the ordered pair 4, comma, negative 14. So what is x? When h of x is negative 14, x is 4. Okay. C and D are very similar. C, if g of x equals this, determine x if g of x is 10. So g of x is right here. If g of x equals 10, then I'm going to put 10 in place of g of x and solve for x, substituting 10 for g of x. So whenever they ask you to find x, you're going to have to solve for x. Subtract 7 from both sides. 3 equals negative 1/2 x. Multiply both sides by the reciprocal of negative 1/2, which is negative 2 over 1, or just negative 2. I'm left with x equals negative 6. So the answer is an x value of negative 6, which means f of negative 6, when x is negative 6, the output is 10. So that would be the ordered pair, negative 6, comma 10. And for D, find k of 2/3. if k of x equals 12x plus 8, so you can see they put the 2/3 where the x is. So k of 2/3 means I'm going to put 2/3 in place of x and find the output. 12 over 1 times 2 over 3 is 24 divided by 3. 24 divided by 3 is 8. 8 plus 8 is 16. So k of 2/3 is equal to 16, which means when I input 2/3, my output is 16. So the ordered pair associated with that would be 2/3, comma, 16. And the last example today is an application of function notation. Remember we said f of x is common, but you don't have to use f and you don't have to use x. Just like when you're using word problems, oftentimes we use d to represent distance, t to represent time. In this example, you want to buy a fish aquarium and some fish. Nemo's Reef sells aquariums for $50 plus $5 for every fish. So this sounds like a linear function because you have a starting amount of $50 and then you have a constant rate of change of adding $5 for every fish that you purchase. Write an equation. C of f represents the cost. So C of f represents the cost. And f would be the input, which represents the number of fish. So in this example, to find the cost, C of f, you have to multiply the number of fish you purchase times 5, and then you have to add 50 for the starting value for the aquarium. Find C of 5, so you can see that they have substituted 5 where the f is inside the parentheses. So I'm going to substitute 5 for f. So this means what's the cost for 5 fish? So C of 5 would be 5 times 5 plus 50. 25 plus 50 is 75. So that means for 5 fish, the cost is $75. Find f, and f is number of fish. How many fish when the C of f, the cost of that many fish is 100. So this is saying the cost is 100. So when the cost is 100, solve for how many fish that would be. So notice they said C of f equals 100, so I substituted 100 where the C of f is. Now I'm going to solve, subtract 50 from both sides, and I'm left with 50 equals 5f, so f equals 10, which means C of 10 is 100. 10 fish, $100. Okay, we're going to graph this, label and scale your axis appropriately. So the input is the number of fish because that is the independent variable. The dependent is the cost because the cost is dependent on the number of fish. So we have f, the input, and C of f is the output. Since I have a starting cost of $50 and an increase of 5 after that, I'm going to label my x-axis by tens. So each box represents $10. And then I'm going to use a scale of 1 on the x-axis. So again, for 0 fish, and I just went ahead and bought the aquarium today, 0 fish would be $50. That's my starting amount. I'm increasing by $5 every fish, or $10 every 2 fish. And here's where we end up with C of 10 is 100. C of 5 is 75. So there's a point here for every one fish. I would not connect these points because this is discrete data. These are distinct points because it doesn't make sense to connect the points. Connecting the points would mean that I can buy half a fish. That does not make sense. So anything in between here, when you connect the points, means that those points, like 0.5, 52.5, would make sense. That doesn't make sense. You're not going to buy half a fish for your aquarium. So this is discrete data, distinct points, but you can't, because you can't buy a fraction of a fish, which means the domain is just a list of numbers you could use, starting with 0. I could buy 0 fish. 1, 2, 3, 4, ... indicating that starting with 0 and continuing. And then the range, what is the associated cost for each of those items of the domain? Well, if I bought 0 fish, I would pay $50. 1, I would pay $55. 2, I would pay $60. 3, I would pay $65. 4, I would pay $70, and ... So that's how I would identify the domain and the range. Okay, you have a practice assignment to complete before tomorrow. Thank you.